Well, what a 24 hours it's been in the atheist community. Far out. When you think it can't get any more bizarre, any stranger, yesterday happens. So, what are we talking about today? So, we're going to have a look at an organization called Atheist Alliance International that's been the subject of a bit of controversy over the last few years, actually, and a lot of things that have been brought to light sort of pretty recently, mainly in the last 24 hours, I guess, from my point of view. And certainly that's what I want to talk about. Plus, I guess what I'd call the Battle of the Johns, which is John Hamill and John Richards on a podcast, or I don't know what it was actually, but it was they were on a stream together from opposite ends of this argument in a fairly heated and interesting conversation that I do want to talk about. So we'll start off with, I guess, what is Atheist Alliance International for those who don't know. So Atheist Alliance International is, or should be, the leading atheist organization representing atheist interests globally. It's not really that, but we can get into that a little bit later. It's the only atheist or secular organization, I believe, that has consultative status with the United Nations, which is a pretty big deal. And that's something that was achieved years ago. So what I've got here is I've actually got their website up, and we'll have a look at, I guess, the history of AAI according to their website. So they were founded in the United States as the Atheist Alliance in 1991 by 4 local US atheist organizations. We don't need to read who they are. And then they quickly added affiliates. Within a year, it had 8 organizations as members in the US, and by the end of 92, its first international affiliate. They started publishing a magazine in 94. So, they've been around for quite a while. And especially, coming out of the US, where it is a fairly religious sort of place. But I guess California is where most of these organizations that founded it have come from, which I guess is that's probably where you would expect more atheists to be, I guess, from what little I know in the US. So they began hosting conventions in the mid-90s, go online in 97, as do most organizations, I guess. 2001, they have half a dozen affiliates outside the US and rebrand themselves to Atheist Alliance International. Start holding conferences overseas and so on. So in 2010, they determined they could more effectively pursue their goals by separating the US focus from the global activities, which is actually a fairly sensible thing to do, I think, when you're at that point. So I guess 2010 is when it really becomes an international organization, and the US group Atheist Alliance of America becomes an affiliate member. Interestingly enough, and I will get into this a little bit later, but from what I can see, Atheist Alliance of America does not appear to be an affiliate member of AAI anymore, interestingly enough. And whether that's to do with what's happened, who knows? So in 2017, the AAI board decided to put more emphasis on directly supporting atheists around the world who are excluded, disparaged, discriminated against, and criminalized. Which is, once again, I think that's pretty good, worthy goals, and certainly that was what they were achieving in a lot of circumstances. So why is there controversy surrounding Atheist Alliance International? Well, it all comes back to 2017. So in 2017, it seems as though there was a few people who moved on from the board, including John Hamill, who was the secretary at the time. Now, John Hamill left in February of 2017. It seems over the next few months, a few other people leave, which, look, isn't unusual in organizations. Usually when a couple of people start to leave, organizations will turn over. I've been involved with organizations where new leadership comes on the board and a lot of people will leave, fresh people come in. It's very, very normal for an organization. And you usually do have, I guess, a little bit of what I call a difficult time where you've got a few people doing a lot of jobs, which it seems as though has happened here. Incidentally, sorry, I haven't been responding to the chat, but good to see you all. I will try and respond as best I can. Hey, I'm here. I just saw Randy asking, is Jay all right? Look, as far as I know, Jay is all good. I haven't spoken to him for a little bit, not for any reason apart from we just haven't been streaming as much. I've had a few things going on that have sort of kept me busy. I think he's been a bit busy. I actually really would love to catch up for a stream with Jay at some point soon. I'll probably message him. This wasn't really a planned thing I was going to do today. So this is I was planning on starting to do a little bit more streaming from this week, but this wasn't a planned one. So yeah, anyway. And Randy's also asking if I coordinated with Jeff. Jeff actually did a stream last night. I was actually on that stream where we discussed, went over the video that we'll talk about again later. So I guess getting back to the timeline. So in September of 2017, John Richards is asked to come onto the board. He's co-opted onto the board, which once again is not something that is unusual when you have a number of people leave. You will have people who will be placed onto the board, and as per, I guess, the bylaws of most organisations, and certainly of Atheist Alliance International, that's with the understanding that at the next general election, that person will either seek re-election to the position they have been appointed to, or they would resign, which is very standard. Very standard. In fact, in 2016, a similar thing happened with a board that I was put on, where I was placed on the board because they were short some people, and I had had some discussions about coming onto the board or running the following year. So I was placed on the board at the AGM at the end of that year. I stood for election and was elected. Now, what the controversy seems to be is that it appears, or the claim that John Hamill has made, and when I say that the claim he's made this claim with documentation. So the claim he has made is that John Richards and others who were on the board or who had been put on the board then did not stand again at the AGM. And it seems as though there may have been AGMs that were not held, or AGMs that were held incorrectly where members weren't advised and there weren't opportunities given for people to either stand for election or actually vote. I don't have all the details on that. I will try and get some more information around that, but this is just, I guess, a bit of a brief background going into it. Now, the claim that John Richards initially made was that, and it does get a bit confusing with the two Johns, but just try and follow on with me as best you can. So John Richards was appointed as the affiliates director on the board, and then became the editor of the magazine, the Secular World magazine that they have. But he was certainly on the board, it seems, for a period of about 3 years. Now, during that time, he never actually stood for election. And it seems as though a number of other people didn't stand for election, or in the case where one of them did, they stood for election where one person voted, which obviously is not what happens with an international organisation. So John Hamill is claiming that this board was illegitimate, which I tend to agree with. If there was no votes or no one stood at the AGM, well, then there isn't necessarily a board. That's in line with what usually would happen in organizations. It's also a part of the bylaws that are in there. The bylaws actually specifically state that you need to stand for election at the next board meeting. So I'm going to go to the bylaws very quickly. I believe it was, from memory, it was bylaw number 63. Maybe not. Okay. I will. Okay, so election of officers. So okay, so elections of officers may be conducted at the discretion of the board. So there is an opportunity for that to happen. If only one person is nominated for any office or position, they do not face election. So that's the interesting one. So number 53. So all that really needed to happen was, a very simple. They have an AGM. They give notice of 30 days, at which time they say they call for nominations. Now, if one person nominates, well, they're elected. They didn't even go through that process, which is, I guess, the concerning thing. So, as far as I'm concerned, legally, that was an illegitimate board. Now, what malice was involved, I guess that's for the individuals to talk about. So yesterday, this has there's been a lot of back and forth between John Hamill and a few other people, because John Hamill's been calling it out, saying it is an illegitimate board, calling out the issues that there are with it, which I think is fair enough. He's certainly more than entitled to do. And John Richards and others have been firing back, and John Richards has been fairly vocal in firing back. So after a bit of online back and forth, John said, "Well, come on to my podcast and we'll discuss it." And John Hamill's agreed to. Now, actually, I've just had there's just been a note in the comments from Martin Bors saying that Richards was appointed to the board under the old bylaws, which were different. Okay, I don't have a copy of the old bylaws, so that is, that would be accurate. I know there was some changes to the bylaws that were made. I don't know exactly what that is or what the changes were. I haven't sort of gone that deep into it. So yesterday we have over on John Richards' channel, the Free Thought Project, John Hamill is the guest, and they're going to discuss it. Now, I want to call out bad behavior. I'm absolutely going to call out some complete bullshit that went on that stream. I'm going to throw a critique out there of John Hamill first. Look, I thought he was fairly aggressive in the stream, came on saying corrupt, dishonest, things like that. Now, this isn't to say that those things aren't accurate. However, I think when you're a guest on someone's podcast, I think just a bit of decorum when they're sort of invited you on to have the conversation, that's probably not the way I'd go with it. But certainly that wasn't the worst of the behavior. And look, that's probably the only thing I would critique John Hamill on. I think in the context of the whole stream, John actually really, really did well, because I probably would have told John Richards to fuck off and left the stream. I would have rage quit. I'm not a rage quitter. I would have rage quit that thing. That was definitely rage quittable. So anyway, I just wanted to get that out of the way. Now, on to John Richards. Now, I've had a little bit to do with John Richards. I've always gotten on reasonably well with him. We're certainly not close by any means. But it's from time to time we've had a conversation. We probably speak every couple of months. We actually spoke a couple of weeks ago about something completely unrelated. But we've always had a polite relationship. I think he's had me on a stream with him once in the last couple of years. I had him on about 2.5 years ago about some other controversy, but we've always just had a polite relationship. In fact, when he was with Atheist Alliance International, he actually approached me about becoming the Australasian director, which obviously never eventuated. He actually left not long after he offered it to me, and I think he was gone like a week later. So it really didn't eventuate, and it wasn't really something that I was likely to take up anyway, because I've sort of got enough going on in my life without sort of throwing that on top as well. So I guess, I went into this stream yesterday, and incidentally, I will put the link for the stream down below, but I'm assuming most people who are here have probably seen the stream. It's doing the rounds. So I went into the stream with a bit of an open mind. I've even sort of said to people who have been commenting on it in groups, let's just keep an open mind and see what happens. It seems as though John Hamill's on a, it seems to be a bit of a vendetta possibly. Let's just keep an open mind and listen to it all. So that's the attitude I went in to that stream with. Came out with a very different view. Look, I'm just going to put it out there and say the way that John Richards acted on that stream yesterday was wrong. It was disgusting. He constantly muted John Hamill. Every time John would try and get a point across or start speaking, he was constantly being muted. I didn't count the amount of times, but I would have to say probably at least 30 times John Hamill got muted, which if you're going to have someone as a guest to have a discussion with them, you don't get them on and just mute them. That was really, really just a joke. There was one point where John gave a 10-minute presentation and made a point of saying, I will give you the same time. And I think within about 30 seconds of John Hamill, responding, he interrupts or they interrupt. He was constantly sort of making, smart-ass comments. He wasn't taking the conversation seriously. He just wanted to take control of the conversation and try and make John Hamill look like a fool, which ultimately I think backfired on him really, really poorly. So John Richards was asked why he didn't resign. So the first question that John Hamill asked John Richards was, it might just be easier to call him Hamill and Richards. So I might just do that. So the first question Hamill asked Richards was why he didn't resign when he was meant to. Now, the initial response that Richards gives is, well, he had 12 months. So look, that could be put down to a genuine misunderstanding, thinking that he got appointed in September of 2017 and he had 12 months. But other people who were on the board would have surely known that, no, that's not the case. What happens in any organization is if you're appointed, you are appointed until the next AGM. So then he was asked why he didn't stand at the AGM. The next excuse he gives was because the state of Atheist Alliance International was so desperate and so bad. And the reasons he gave were interesting, to say the least. He said that it was going bankrupt. But Richards also, when pushed, didn't know how much was actually in the bank. So apparently there was around about $50,000 in the bank of Atheist Alliance International in 2017. Richards claims it was hemorrhaging money at about $10,000 a year. Now, maths isn't my strong point. I'm not going to lie. But when you're losing $10,000 and you got 50 in the bank, that's not hemorrhaging money to the point where it's about to go bankrupt. In a worst case scenario, if nothing changes, there's 5 years there. Plus there's going to be income that will come in. There's other things. And no one's going to leave it like that for a long period of time. Now, in any organization, I've sat on boards where, there'll be some, you're not there to make a profit for a start. You've got to balance the books. But if you've got money, the money is there to be spent on what it needs to be spent on. And $50,000 for an organization like that, it's probably not, it's not sensational, but it's not bad either. I mean, the money's there and it's there to be used. They're spending $10,000 or they're going backwards by $10,000 a year. Okay, that's not too bad. But organizations will have years where they'll bring in substantial funds, whether that's through fundraising, through membership drives, or any other, sort of method. It could be bequeathed to an organization. And then there'll be years where they'll be spending money, whether they need to, there's campaigns that they need to particularly work on, whether there's a number of different things going on. So I think the idea that it was hemorrhaging money and about to go bankrupt and in such a dire situation. So I almost said dire straits. There you go. That's the music on the mind, obviously. But to say it was in such a dire situation, I don't believe that's fair, especially when Richards has said he didn't, or, certainly the implication I got was he didn't actually know how much was in the bank. Now, the next thing was that they needed to spend money on a website because the website was a shambles. It wasn't, it wasn't mobile compatible, and it was some links were redirecting to porn sites or something along those lines. Now, we didn't really get into, or I say we, in the conversation, they didn't really get into what the porn sites, this was just the claim that was made, but a basic understanding of anything to do with websites will tell you that the website itself doesn't need to be redone if it's directing to a porn site. What needs to be done is links need to be changed, or if there's an issue with the site itself, or if there's something that's causing it to redirect, that's what needs to change. Because if, say, atheistalliance.org was redirecting to an adult website, changing the website isn't necessarily going to fix that, because the link is still going to be the link. It's something that's not uncommon in boards. And I remember a board that I sat on, and they were looking at updating the website, because it did need updating, and some of the costs that came in, and some of the, I guess, what I'd call the shady sales jobs from web companies, saying, oh, you need this and you need this and you need this. It does happen, and often on boards you get a lot of people who aren't necessarily computer savvy, or certainly aren't internet savvy. Tends to be a lot of older men generally, and older men are not the most tech savvy people. And I guess from not commenting on John's age, I don't know or Richard's age, I don't know how old he is, but he's not young, and from the conversations I've had with him, I don't think he's overly tech savvy. So I mean, people can pull the wool over eyes. There's no two ways about that. But regardless, I mean, a bit of due diligence will fix that up. So, it's not that hard to sort of work that one out. There was also something about the database was too complicated, or, so they needed to change it. It was costing too much. But databases are expensive, especially well-run databases. Now, with a well-run database, you can get a lot of things out there. Now, the database gets changed in 2017, but then they're unable to message all their members for the AGM the following year. So I'm thinking the database that they changed to probably wasn't the best idea. Why do you need to go and change a complete database? But regardless of these things, if these are things that need to be fixed, okay, well, that's the kind of stuff a board does. That isn't an extraordinary situation where you say, we need to take it over and not have elections. I mean, these were essentially unelected people who were making decisions for an international organization where they shouldn't have. So, one other real big issue I have with this stream that happened yesterday was John Richards had someone he introduced, so Tercia was her name, and he introduced her as a neutral moderator, and she sort of made the claim that she didn't really know much about it. She'd intentionally not wanted to know much about it, so she could ask questions and she could just be a neutral party. That couldn't have been further from the truth. And anyone who watched it, that would have been apparent to them, because she constantly interrupted. She was throwing her opinion out there. She started off, kind of half reasonably coming across as a neutral moderator, but it was pretty clear, sort of about half an hour into it, that she was probably more acting as Richard's defense lawyer. She would constantly interrupt Hamill, as Hamill would start to talk about things, and if it wasn't Richards interrupting, it would or muting Hamill, she'd be coming in over the top, and I think that kind of thing is done to throw people off their train of thought. It's a bullshit tactic that gets used, and it was absolutely apparent that she knew what was going on, because towards the end she said she started to list off the things that AAI had done and what they were doing. And I'm thinking, well, not bad for someone who didn't even know or claimed to not know anything about the organization, about an hour ago. Now, Hamill has made a claim on Twitter, and this is a claim that Hamill's made. When he was backstage before the show, they didn't realize he was there, which can happen. If you've got the link, you go in backstage. People don't always realize that someone's there. And I've actually had John invite me onto a stream before where I think I sat there for a few minutes while he was there. I was backstage. I had to send him a message going, "Hey, I'm here." And it's not just John. That happens, with a few people. I've had it happen with me where someone sent me a message going, "Hey, I'm backstage." It happens. There's no big issue with that. But while he was backstage, the claim Hamill has made is that this Tercia and Richards were discussing a signal for when to mute John or when to mute Hamill or when to go for the full screen or for when to interrupt. So obviously the whole thing was a setup. So Richards has got Hamill on not for a discussion, but rather to try and embarrass, to try and put his view across, to lecture. And he's done it in a really, really dishonest way. It was like Richards has come out of this looking really, really bad. Really bad. Like I can't emphasize. I went in with an open mind thinking this was something that was, I was interested to hear the conversation. I was interested to have an open mind and hear both sides. I left just going, what the hell is going on? Like, this is an absolute shit show. And not a shit show of Hamill's doing. I mean, Hamill he's on the attack. He's going at this like there's no tomorrow, and I can understand why. Now, I have had debates on this channel where Jay has moderated. So Jay, for those who don't know, is my co-host. But we've always been pretty clear about it with people who have come on and said, Jay's going to moderate. If you're not happy with that, let us know. That's fine. But by the same token, Jay is always neutral, and Jay kind of probably goes a bit harder on me in those circumstances than anything because he's so determined to appear neutral, or to appear that he's not sort of favoring. But this hasn't happened here. This was a poorly executed setup, which ended very strangely with, as Hamill saying, and he'd very well shown that it wasn't a democratically elected board. This Tercia says, well, I don't care, because, and then goes into this rant about how a benign dictatorship is better than democracy based on her experience. Now she's in South Africa. She sort of had a brief thing about people dying in hospitals and things like that because of the ANC. I know a little bit about South African politics. I don't know a lot. What I do know is that what the ANC replaced was pretty ordinary, and that's not what you would want. But certainly having, it's for her to say, I don't care about, this is the neutral moderator in a discussion about whether a board was democratically elected or not, going, I don't care. I prefer benign dictatorships. I mean, seriously. That was just insane. That was insane. That was, if there was ever a moment that I think probably her and Richards would want to take back, I reckon that would be it, because it was a joke. I mean, who the fuck says that? I mean, seriously. Anyway, it happened. And the conversation went on for about an hour after that with, I think probably Richards muting Hamill about 20 more times. And the same thing kind of over and over again, apart from Richards sort of wanting to then say that, well, does it matter if good work has been done? And, wanting to talk about 21 things that had happened. Let me tell you, I've looked at those 21 things that happened. Okay, sorry. I'm assuming that people have seen it. So Richards brought up 21 things that AAI had done within the last 12 months. And then his argument was, if these good things are happening, well, why does the past matter? Why does the past matter? Well, let me tell you why the past matters. The past matters because for an organization to be legitimate and move forward and to achieve a lot more than it did in the last 12 months, These things need to be addressed. You can't just ignore what has happened. You can't just say, oh, okay, well, it was an illegitimate board. All this stuff happened, but, it's doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. It does matter. This is an organization that represents atheists at the United Nations. They are representing me at the United Nations. They are representing probably the majority of people who are watching this, who are atheists. They are going out and representing us, and they're not legitimate. They have not been elected. They do not have a mandate to do this. There is a problem. And when you've got a situation like this, people like me, regular atheists, are not going to support this organization. Affiliates, other organizations around the world are not going to support this organization. And the Atheist Alliance, the American one, they're not even listed as an affiliate anymore. And some of the affiliates they've got mentioned are like blogs. I mean, technically, I guess Hereticals could become an affiliate. We're certainly not an organization that is involved in atheist works, but even some of the affiliates, I've got some questions about some of the affiliates they claim to have, and I am gonna run through some of those in a minute, looking at ones in Australia in particular. Now, imagine how much more an atheist organization that speaks at the United Nations could do if it was legitimate, united, and represented a large variety of atheist organizations and a majority of atheist organizations. Imagine. Certainly more than 21 things. And look, the 21 things that it claims to have done, I mean, some of them are huge. Some of them are, look, they're all good things. Don't get me wrong, they're all good things. But I mean, some of them is just, sending a few $100s to support someone's family. We're not talking about the kind of things that a large international atheist organization with United Nations, that represents that the United Nations should be doing. I mean, I would say that it's probably it's not probably, it's underachieving. So I am going to read a couple of comments here. Sorry, I have been trying to get to as many of them. Hey, good to see you, Oz, as well. Good friend of the channel, Oz from Tart. So Martin Bors has said, one reason this is such an important issue is that the board before Richards worked hard to get special consultative status at the UN, and that's now at risk due to the actions of Richards and friends. Completely agree. I noticed too, a lot of the people who, I mean, not Richards, but a lot of the people who were mentioned who took over at this time are still sitting on the board. Hopefully they've been elected by now. Atheist Ireland used a special consultative status to speak to the UN and help get the blasphemy laws removed from the Irish constitution. That improves the lives of potentially millions of people. Absolutely. That's the kind of thing that you should be doing with a special consultative status. And yeah, since 2018, there's only been a few embarrassing and ineffective submissions to the UN. Now, one of those there was a video, I think, that was put out for the Secretary General of the United Nations, demanding the right to be secular. The United Nations, it's actually the UN Charter, the right to be secular, the right to freedom of religion and to be secular. So they've gone in demanding something that already existed. So that's the kind of representation we're getting at the United Nations from Atheist Alliance International. Now, let's have a look at, I do want to bring up something I've looked at. So the affiliates. Now, I'm going to focus on Australia here to start with, because Australia is what I know. So in Australasia, which I assume, or my understanding when I was approached about becoming the director for Australasia, was it was Australia, New Zealand, and the Pacific. So there's 3 organizations that are listed here in Australasia, all of which are in Australia, and from the looks of it, I think all of which are in Melbourne, which is one city in Australia, for those who don't know. Americans pronounce it Melbourne, so if you're confused, it's Melbourne for the Americans, Melbourne for the rest of us. So let's have a look at who these affiliates who are, advertised as, being part of this international alliance are. So we've got Progressive Atheists. This is Progressive Atheists website, and from what I can see, the website kind of speaks for itself a little bit there, but it doesn't look as though they've done anything or had anything really happening since, here we go, events 2018. So there's not a lot happening there. So I don't even know if this is an active organization. The last post was on the 22nd of April, 2020. So over 2 years ago. And that was an online lecture. Prior to that, January of 2020, which was Clean Up Australia Day, which that's like it's a day where people go and do clean up rubbish. It's a bit of an Australian thing. It happens once every year. Prior to that, it was Clean Up Australia Day 2019. So this isn't really an active organization from what I can see. Now, I could be wrong. If I'm wrong, I apologize. Actually, I've just been told that Steve Rawlings from Progressive Atheists was the only person to attend the 2018 AGM in person. That's interesting. Okay, that's interesting. Okay, so so that the one vote came from Progressive Atheists, which I guess isn't even really an active organization. Now, the Rationalist Society of Australia, that is absolutely an active organization. I'm familiar with them. No two ways about it. They are active. Not really, I wouldn't say they represent the majority of atheists in Australia. They certainly represent a segment. They're fairly political, I guess. So they represent one aspect of one part of the spectrum of the. I say they're pretty political. They're a non-political organisation, but they're political if you get my meaning. Now, the other one is the Secular Party of Australia. Now, I don't think a secular organisation, a political party or a political organisation should be a member of a group like Atheist Alliance International. I think it should be a non-partisan. I mean, certainly there will be, groups like, I guess, Progressive Atheists. It's pretty clear where they stand on things, and that's fine. But the Secular Party is an actual political party. It would be like the Republicans or the Democrats being a member. It wouldn't be appropriate. Now, despite that, the Secular Party of Australia no longer really exists. Well, it sort of does. Let's go to their website. So what they are now is they are fusion. They merged with the Science Party, the Pirate Party, and the Climate Emergency Party to form a fusion party. So they're not even really the Secular Party of Australia anymore. So, and certainly they haven't been for at least a year. So I question really how up to date this is. And this is just based on what I know from my country. There's no representation in the Pacific. There's no representation in New Zealand that I can see there as well. So let's have a look at some of the other affiliates. Now, I mentioned that the original atheist group that it seems formed, it isn't a part of it anymore. So North America, Atheists for Liberty, they're definitely an active organisation. In fact, I guess if you're going to have the progressives there, Atheists for Liberty is the other end of the spectrum. So it's good that there's representation from both ends. But I mean, if we're going through, a good old Canadian atheists, so I won't get started on them. you can sort of see that, there's a few there. I mean, Small Town Humanist. My understanding is that is a blog or a website. It's not necessarily, it's like a one-man organization, not an actual, what I would consider to be a secular organization. I apologize profusely if I am wrong, but that is my understanding. The Humanist Association of San Diego, things like that. Okay, that's all fine. You have a look here at the in Europe. Now, interestingly enough, in the US, American Atheists isn't listed there. Atheism UK is, but I believe John Richards runs that. Have a look down. Something I thought was really interesting is, where is it? They have Iran under Europe. Now, I do know my geography, and Iran is not in Europe. Iran is in the Middle East. It is in Asia. It is absolutely in Asia. But considering how many different countries there are in Europe, I mean, there's not a lot of representation there. We're not talking a lot of members. You go to South and Central America. My understanding is, I think all bar one of these have disaffiliated. In fact, Martin Bors has said that all 7 Latin American members disaffiliated, but in May, an AAI won't remove them from the website. Puerto Rico, Shirley Rivera, she's been very outspoken against and very publicly resigned from Atheist Alliance International. So I think what they're claiming to represent is just false. I mean, from what I can see, they're a very small organization with UN consultative status. And from what I can see, as far as who's running it, they're not legitimate. They are not legitimately running this organization. So what happened? What do we do moving forward? I mean, how do we address this? Well, I mean, the obvious thing is there needs to the board of Atheist Alliance International needs to immediately, and I mean immediately, set an AGM for 30 days, resign from their positions, and obviously have someone there as a caretaker over that 30-day period, call for nominations, hold an AGM, and have elections, and not elections from these groups that they've got on there now, elections from the people, the 90-odd groups that were affiliates in 2017 when all this bullshit started. It needs to, basically, the last few years need to be acknowledged as illegitimately ran and for the next board to deal with. Now, if the people who are on the board now choose to run and they win, well, good luck to them. Then they can legitimately move forward. I still probably wouldn't want to associate with them because I don't necessarily think that they're a good organization or it's being run as a good organization. But at least they could move forward with legitimacy. As it stands right now, they aren't legitimate. In 2018, they stopped publishing their financials. So everything is behind a closed door. It is dodgy as hell. It is absolutely dodgy. What's going on? I don't even see how it's legal. So I guess, we know what needs to happen. Now, the reality is those things aren't going to happen. So I guess what's the solution? I guess the solution is becoming a member and calling for it to happen, because that's all that can happen. Putting pressure on these organizations to either disassociate or to say, hey, something needs to happen here. Asia, there's a few members. They've got Lebanon in Asia, but they don't have Iran in Asia. I don't know how that works. Germany, they've got a German one in Asia. They've got another Iran. So they've got one Iranian. Okay, if someone can explain this to me, I'd be very, very happy. But I'm just trying to work out how in Asia, they can have Iran, and in Europe, they can have Iran. But then they've also got this Ishtashon, which is in Germany, which has an editor-in-chief. So it's a blog. Maybe it's directed at the Middle East, but it's in Germany. I don't know. There's a lot of things that aren't right. And this is basic stuff. This isn't high-level stuff. This is really things that can just be fixed with a little bit of competence. Getting a board in to look at these things and address them. I mean, Eagles View Primary School. Okay, well, that's probably the humanist school that was funded. That's fine. Humanist associations. Okay, another humanist school. I don't really think you can set up schools, and apologies if these aren't the schools that have been set up, but I don't really think you can set up and fund schools and then have them as voting members. I don't really think that's an appropriate thing. I mean, considering the size of Africa and the need in Africa, there's really not much membership. Free Thinkers Forum, a podcast. These are not international. These are not the kind of affiliates you have for an international organization. This is insane. It's a joke. The whole thing's a joke. Look, getting back to, I guess, the Johns. Hamill is a lot more patient than I am. I seriously would have told Richards to fuck off. I wouldn't have put up with that. I'd love it if anyone actually did a count on how many times he got muted. I'd love to know. Let me know. That would be really, really interested. It wouldn't surprise me if it was 50. I reckon it was probably about 30, but it was just constant. It was just constant. And that's the ones we know about. Tercia was not a neutral moderator. She was John's attack dog and defense lawyer. If you go back and watch it, you'll see every time she speaks, John's got a little smirk on his face. I really think it was Richards has a smirk on his face. It was such poor form. They never answered Hamill's questions. They never addressed, the legitimacy. And look, it's not that hard to say, you know what? Yeah, shit, we should have run in 2018. It was a complete oversight. We missed it and it was wrong. And we addressed it as soon as we realized. Or there was extraordinary circumstances and the advice we were given by such and such is this was what was meant to happen. It's really not that difficult. I mean, I've sat on boards where we've had something go wrong and you address it immediately. I found myself in a situation where, I was president of an organization, and because I'd stood for, I'd run for a political office, we discovered about a week after that actually meant that I wasn't able to serve on the board of that organization. And what happened was a meeting was held that night where I resigned. It wasn't anything malicious that happened. It was just I wasn't aware of the situation. Someone brought it to my attention and it was addressed immediately. I've seen situations where, someone had to leave a board or something, or there's been a vote that's been held in the wrong way and someone's challenged the outcome and okay, yes, and then you go back and you either rehold the vote, you address the situation. It's a basic thing. I mean, just because something goes wrong doesn't mean that there's necessarily any bad intentions behind it, but you have to address it. And here we are 5 years down the track from, 4.5 years down the track from when all of this stuff has happened with this international organization, and it hasn't been addressed, and it needs to be. So look, this is something I'm actually going to take a bit of a keen interest in. And the reason I'm going to take a keen interest in it is because Atheist Alliance International is representing me and is the only group that is representing me at the United Nations. And I'm not happy with the way they're representing me. I'm also not happy with who they have illegitimately representing that organization. I think as it stands right now, there is not a legitimate board. What needs to happen is the people who are in place as the, I'll use in inverted commas, board needs to immediately call an AGM where they address it, give the 30 days notice, have someone appointed as a caretaker. Now, that can be someone who's there now or someone independent. Have someone appointed as a caretaker for that 30 days, call for nominations, and have anyone, any affiliate organization who was a member in 2017 able to vote. Any bylaws that have been changed or any changes to the organization are not legitimate. It needs to revert back to 2017. It needs to be addressed. It needs to be affixed. And then this organization needs to move forward with legitimate people in place and do the job that they've got, which is represent and consult to the United Nations on atheist and secular issues. That's what needs to happen. So look, this isn't the last time I'm going to talk about this. I know it probably hasn't been the most animated podcast or I guess discussion that I'll have, but I did want to go through and I guess talk about things. Now, there's probably been some times where I've just assumed people have known what's going on. If that hasn't happened, I apologize. I'll put all of the links up. It's something I'm going to dive further into. I mean, this is all sort of the last 24 hours for me. So I do intend to look more into this and to call things out as they appear. But there certainly does need to be some changes made. As I said, the board needs to immediately resign. I don't think that's going to happen based on what has happened in the last 4 years. So it might be a case of we need to get people to join and force their hand and recognize that what has happened over the last 4.5 years is not legitimate, revert back and start again, fix the problems, because this was an organization that was previously very well run. You know, I mean, it's an effort to get special consultative status at the United Nations. That is a damn good effort. And that's what we need. Because, I mean, I can assure you the Catholics are there, you know, the Islamists are there, you know, Christian organizations, Buddhists, Hindus, they're all getting their thoughts across. Well, atheists or the secular community or non-religious, I believe, is now the third largest grouping in the religious category. Not that we're religious, but in that, what is your religion? Non-religious is the third largest. We need representation, especially with what's going on in you know, Africa, the Middle East, you know, all throughout the world to secular people. We need to represent who we are better. I mean, let me tell you, it's I'm no fan of the churches, but they know what they're doing. They are damn well organized. They are so well organized, and that is why they still have the benefits they have today. That's still why they still have the impact that they have, you know, why they still have the status, you know, the power that they have, because they're organized and we're not. And we need to get organized. We really need to get on top of this. We need to actually start uniting, putting all these bullshit differences aside, progressive, non-progressive, all these other issues. They all just need to go to the side. And what we need to do is we need an organization like Atheist Alliance International to bring together all of these legitimate atheist organizations. I'm not talking about podcasts and things like I'm a podcast. I'm certainly not going to put myself out there as an atheist organization representing people in Australia because I am a podcast. You know, it's a shame. It's a damn shame. But you know what? When you see things like this, there's a couple of things you can do. You can either stomp your feet, complain and whinge about it, or you can get off your ass and do something about it. I'm going to get off my ass and do something about this. I've got to work out exactly what that is and how I'm going to do it. But I'm going to get off my ass and do something about this. And I'm going to encourage as many other people to join me in getting off their ass and doing something about it. And I know there's plenty of people who are, because we can't sit here and complain about the way atheists get treated throughout this world, in our communities, in our societies, if we're not prepared to do something and make that change ourselves. Now, we all have different skills and abilities. Some can do more, some can do less. But we all need to be prepared to do something. And that could just be something as simple as sharing, getting the word out there. It could be actually getting on the ground and, running for, a spot in Atheist Alliance, or it could be, getting organizations together and united. There's a lot that could be done. It's something I'm certainly going to give a lot of thought to. Look, for those who are new here, you can find me on Twitter at atheist_pastor. Certainly send me a message there. If you have any ideas, if you can think of ways that you can help, or if you think I can help you, reach out, because this is something that needs to be done. This is something that needs to be addressed. Everyone, have a wonderful day, evening, whatever it is, wherever you are on this planet. And I look forward to talking to you all soon. There are going to be more podcasts coming up. It is something that I've been offline for a little while, just sorting a few things out, just life stuff, work, holidays. I've fortunately made a few changes and freed a bit of time up, and good changes, like nothing bad. But I've got a bit more time now, and I'm planning on doing a bit more because this is something I'm passionate about. So everyone, please, if you think I can help, get in touch. If you have ideas, get in touch. Or even if you just want to say, hey, when you think of something, let me know. Get in touch. Let's, I don't care what your political stripes are. I don't care where in the world you're from. Let's do something. Let's actually get this organization back to where it needs to be. Everyone, talk to you soon. I'll catch you all later.